that sharing okay for everyone?
Yes.
Fabulous. Good stuff. Thank you. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining today. I think you've teed me up very nicely there, so hopefully this will be something relatively positive going forwards. We definitely are seeing unprecedented impact on our food supply chain, not just in the UK, but globally as well. My presentation is going to focus on advanced food production techniques, focusing mostly on the cutting edge innovations that are transforming how we grow food. I'm going to explore some techniques like hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics, alternative proteins, and advanced greenhouse technologies that are shaping the future of food production in the UK and worldwide. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a senior lecturer in production horticulture at SRUC. I am based in Edinburgh, so I am hybrid this evening, so it's really great that I'm able to join. And just before I do begin, I just want to highlight that whilst I'm mentioning quite a few different businesses within my presentation, I am not affiliated with any of them. So the only one I am connected to is SRUC's Vertical Farming Innovation Centre from an education research standpoint. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because I do talk about some businesses quite positively. So why is innovation needed in food production? Well, there are a number of reasons, and some of which have already been explained in terms of our growing population. So by 2050, we'll have nearly 10 billion people to feed. When we couple this with climate change and resource shortages, the soil degradation, the land use issues that we have, this is putting tremendous pressure on traditional farming systems. In addition to this, we are already seeing shortages in labour workforce as well in agriculture and production horticulture, both in the UK and further afield as well, but particularly in the UK and in Scotland. Out with the UK, this is largely in part to mass migration to formal and informal urban areas. So urbanisation is a big challenge. This is leaving fewer rural workers. And whilst this is predominantly economically driven, we are now observing unprecedented levels of climate-induced migration as well. So people are almost fleeing because of these climate-induced situations that have just been mentioned. So as a result of that, we really need more sustainable, efficient, and scalable food production methods that can be employed in light of these challenges. And that's what I'm going to talk about, some of the methods that we can do. But before I do that, I just wanted to highlight the image that's on the screen at the moment. So as you can see, it's a map of the world. What it's showing you is the projected change in agricultural productivity by 2080 as a result of climate change, both negatively, they're the ones in orange and in red, but also positively as well. So these are the ones that are observed in green. And what you can see is what I would call the quote unquote breadbasket of the world. The USA, Brazil, India, Australia will be considerably impacted by climate change. And these are a lot of they have huge amounts of food production, more than we could ever even imagine. And I think it just sets the scene as to why we need these innovations. So with this in mind, that is now what I'm going to cover in order to be able to kind of counterbalance the loss of productivity in traditional farming areas. So to begin with, I'm going to focus on hydroponics. So hydroponics is a soil-less growing method where plants absorb nutrients and oxygen from water. There's many different types of hydroponic systems, including nutrient film technique, also referred to as NFT. There is deep water culture and also ebb and flow. They all do the same sort of thing in terms of that supply of nutrient and oxygen within water. But they can also be closed loop, where they completely circulate and they recapture any loss, or they can be non-circulating systems as well. Predominantly, they are that closed loop system, which makes them really efficient. And whilst I have mentioned this is a soilless method, the plants still need some form of substrate. So they're not substrate free, whilst they are soil free. And that is typically coir, but you could also use things like clay pellets. And actually, even with my students, I quite often have them growing just in sponges, just to show that it can be done. So in terms of substrates, they can be, again, more sustainable and moving away, particularly in production horticulture, from peat, but also moving away from soil as well to allow the land to regenerate itself. So some of the benefits really and why hydroponics is important within agriculture and food production in general is that it uses up to 90% less water than traditional agriculture. That's mostly through that circulatory system, that closed loop system, but also in terms of the way that it can recapture. And if it was done within a glass house, for example, there are ways of recapturing the humidity as well and putting that back into the system. This can be done indoors. Um, it can be done outside too, so you can do it at home too, but on a commercial scale, it would be done indoors in urban areas. And this is where it gets really exciting because when we're thinking about that mass migration of people towards urban centres, we need to think about how we can reduce our food miles and move food closer to those people and reduce our carbon output. And this is a way to be able to do that because we can use urban warehouses and vertical farms and all sorts of things installing these types of systems. They can be very low technology, almost passive in some systems, or for commercial growers, they tend to be quite technologically advanced. So they'll also use integrated LED lighting and just really create that completely closed system, which allows for year-round production. And this is a really exciting thing with hydroponics and any of the things I'm going to talk about today, because we need to be able to think about in Scotland, how can we grow food here when we are very limited by the seasons? And using these types of systems allows us to grow 365 days a year. So just a couple of examples just to highlight this in action. We have a UK-based company called Let Us Grow. They are using hydroponic systems. They do a lot of developments with researchers and tech developers as well, and they specialize in hydroponics and also aeroponic urban farming. So they are kind of the leader, shall we say, from a UK perspective, looking into hydroponic solutions for urban farms. Secondly, looking more into Europe, there's a company called InFarm. This is kind of cool, actually. What they've done is they've developed modular hydroponic farming within supermarkets. So you can see it on the screen up in the top right, which I refer to them almost like vending machines, where you can kind of type in what you want and it'll open up and you can take out what you want. So this is for things like herbs and leafy greens as well. And I think that's kind of exciting to be able to have your food growing in the shop that you buy it from. It is as fresh can be without it growing in your own garden or from a local farm. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight that SRUC now has a vertical farm innovation centre. So what we do is we use an ebb and flow system. So this type of system floods the benches and then it drains away, and we recapture the drained water and nutrient solution, and we clean it and then we recycle it again. We combine this with LED lighting, and that's actually what you can see on the bottom picture on the right hand side. So this is actually within our vertical farm trialing some basil production. And we are really focusing on research and education into enhancing food production in the presence of climate change. Not only that, we're also looking at things like how can we use different lighting colours to make food more nutritious. And I think before it was mentioned around soil degradation and food is no longer as nutritious. And this is a big food security issue. And that's the kind of thing that we're focusing on at SRUC at the moment, which is really exciting for me to be involved in. So moving now on to aquaponics. So aquaponics is, again, it's a closed loop system. And what it does is it combines aquaculture, fish farming, with hydroponics. So the hydroponics I've just mentioned just there, which is crop production, this adds the element of fish farming in there too. So what it does is it connects large tanks that contain edible fish species, such as tilapia or trout, freshwater salmon, with plants growing in that hydroponic system. And essentially what happens is that the fish waste provides nutrients for the plants, and the plants clean the water, which is then recirculated back to the fish. So the system utilizes a variety of mechanical and organic filters to remove the solid waste, which then allows for all of the dissolved nutrients to feed the plants. The main advantage of this system is that it's highly efficient. Technically, it could be classed as organic, although it's not certifiable, and that might be a thing that we talk about in the Q&A, is that we cannot certify as organic within any of these systems, although it is as close as you can get. It reduces reliance on synthetic fertilizers, and it also has the added bonus of being a mixed farming method. So 2 revenue streams from not just the plants, but also the fish too. So again, from a food security perspective, aquaponics is really important. And as with hydroponics, this method can be installed in urban areas, but also there are some rural farmers doing this too. I've helped some subsistence farmers in Tanzania set up some aquaponics systems, and they're doing really, really well. So it is possible to do small scale subsistence right through to large scale. And talking about large scale, I'll come on to Superior Fresh in a minute because I've never seen anything like it. But first I'll focus on BioAqua, just as an example. So this again is a UK-based company, and they are farming organically fed rainbow trout, and they're producing a variety of different horticultural produce. So not just lettuce, but also tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries, anything you can think of really. They've got that system working really, really well. But what they're also doing, which is quite interesting, is that they've now started to specialize in training programs too. So they are kind of the go-to in aquaponics if you are interested in branching out into it and starting a business in it. But I mentioned just before Superior Fresh. Now, this is an American company. They are the world's largest aquaponic farm. And when I say the world's largest, they are massive. They are producing 680 tons of salmon a year, 18,000 heads of lettuce a day. It is vast what they are doing. And from a glasshouse perspective, they have about 5 hectares. So just to put it into context, which isn't a huge amount if you compare that to traditional farming on the land, how productive this is and how efficient they have made it. And in addition to that, they're also self-proclaimed, and I will say self-proclaimed on their website, as America's best salmon. What I would note is that they're based in Wisconsin. So they are a land-based company growing fish and producing fish in the middle of America. So it's a really fantastic way of kind of doing that integrated mixed farming method with protein production as well as crop production too. Now, this is where things get really interesting and a bit more exciting for me because it starts getting quite techy. This is aeroponics. So aeroponics takes soil-free farming a little bit further. So similar to hydroponics, although the plants themselves are suspended in midair and they are sprayed through nozzles with nutrient-rich mist. So why is it exciting? Well, it's even more water efficient than hydroponics. It uses 95% less water than traditional farming. It has faster growth and higher yields due to enhanced root oxygenation and also highly efficient root systems. So instead of the plants having to create these really, really vast, expansive root systems searching for nutrients and oxygen, everything is supplied to it. So they tend to have these really like quite little but very fibrous root systems because they're really, really efficient, which increases the yield of the plants overall. If it's done right as well, this system tends to have little to zero incidence of disease. So you wouldn't need to use any pesticides. in order to control anything, because the system itself is as clean can get. It's currently, which is kind of cool, being trialed by NASA for growing plants in space too.
Mhm.
But from a sustainability perspective, this system has very little waste. Any excess water and nutrients are collected and recirculated. But when this is integrated with things like AI, which I'll come on to in a little bit, this is where it becomes so precise, that the plants get exactly what they need, exactly when they need it. So there is virtually no waste at all. So there's a couple of examples of this. You can see Lettuce Grower back on the screen. I promise I don't work for them. So first I'll focus on AR farms. So they use the latest breakthroughs in vertical farming. So they are classed as a vertical farm, but they have this aeroponic system implemented. They combine that with AI. So just as I was mentioning, so they're able to create this really highly controlled growing environment. And typically they specialize in microgreens, leafy greens, and herbs. Now, most of what I'm talking about at the moment, that's where we're at. But there are some really exciting up and coming innovations going further into other horticultural produce, and at some point I would imagine more of the sort of arables as well. But second, I'm just going to focus on Lettuce Grow again. So I've mentioned them earlier, and what they are doing is they're currently focusing on a new form of aeroponics. So not using these nozzles. Instead, what they're doing is using ultrasonic sound waves to disrupt the water, to disperse it into a mist. So you can see that on the screen, I think, quite nicely on the right-hand side, this mist system. And I think one of the biggest advantages of this is that it doesn't use a nozzle, as I mentioned. So there's no buildup of any of the nutrients or the salts within the system. So there's no need really for cleaning, which is quite beneficial. But what they've also done, which is really exciting, is that they've managed to integrate this technology into roller benches, which are really commonly used in production horticulture. So from my perspective, this is a game changer, because normally these types of systems are static, as you can see on the image on the left. They would be integrated into a sort of a system that just stays still. Whereas they've managed to create these really cool roller benches, which means that you can move your produce around into different growing environments depending on the stage of production that they're in. So that's the kind of thing that I think we'll see more of going into different types of produce, and kind of getting away from the really typical microgreens, leafy veg that we see at the moment in these kind of systems. So this is where we get a little bit more techie. We are now in what is called the era of agriculture 4.0, and they're in horticulture 4.0, 4.0. So what I mean by this is smart farming. This is a tech-driven revolution in agriculture with the goal of increasing production and efficiency, whilst doing so with full consideration of sustainability from an economic, environmental, and social perspective, which is really, I think, quite good, because the social side of sustainability quite often gets missed. Which, if any of my students ever watch this, they'll know exactly what I mean, because I talk about it all the time. But back to horticulture 4.0. So this is where we're referring to the use of Internet of Things, or IoT. So lots of sensors and vision technologies that all talk to each other. It's using big data, so massive data sets that can be used to really monitor crops effectively. Artificial intelligence, so using things like vision technology, like cameras that can act as if they are people almost, but also robotics as well. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the adoption of these 4.0 solutions in agriculture means a variety of different things. For example, avoiding unnecessary waste by calculating exact water requirements of a crop at any given growing condition, and then dispensing that amount of water accordingly. So in places like, for example, in Greece, where water efficiency is so vital for their production of, and I'm assuming that most of us here have eaten olives or use olive oil. Most of that comes from the likes of Greece and Italy and Spain that are having significant challenges with the availability of water. So they are currently looking into the use of different sensors to be able to apply water accordingly. But it can also be used for things like detecting the early onset of certain pests and diseases so that we can selectively apply integrated pest management techniques and really reduce down the number of pesticides that we use. It can also improve the traceability of the supply chain, reducing food miles by growing food closer to the population, as I've mentioned, so vitally important with urbanization. And also through the integration of robotics, which will, particularly for the UK, compensate for fewer seasonal workers that are available for harvesting. So just some examples. Now, I've put the Netherlands up here as an example. It's not a business, but it is a country that is leading the way in developing these smart farming technologies. And what I've noticed is that they've really nailed the trifecta of incorporating businesses with research institutes and tech developers to really create these incredible technologies. So instead of them working in silos, they actually have these hubs that people get together to work on these kind of technologies. And I think that's why, particularly in horticulture, the Netherlands is the world leader in anything horticultural related. So, for example, there's some images on the screen here, so I'll talk through them. So the one on the bottom left, this is a smart robot, and what it does is it scours fields for diseases in tulips. So it's looking for different fire diseases that cause streaking and all sorts of problems in tulips, which obviously for the Netherlands is super important. But this is the kind of tech that could be applied to sort of field production of broccoli, for example. And what it does is it uses cameras, and you basically tell it what it should look like, and then anything that isn't that, it will act accordingly, whether it's to remove it. It might have a like a pincer that'll cut that flower out. It can have a variety of different things in there. It might have some sprayers and all sorts. So it's applicable technology. They're also starting to use drones in glasshouses, again, using vision technology to monitor crops, which allows for more efficient use of space because you don't need to have people crop walking up and down the aisles of the crops. And also they're starting to now develop robots for not just harvesting, but pruning as well for fruit trees. So this one that you can see on the screen on the bottom right, this is for a pear tree. So again, you have to just tell it what a pear tree should look like, and it will do its thing. So integrating these technologies is really important because it can significantly improve the accuracy of agricultural practices, whilst also reducing the time spent doing so. And given the need to produce more in a more effective way, the integration of AI and robotics, I think, it just has to happen. I don't think we have a choice anymore. But one really exciting technology, and this is a UK technology that is now actually being used in strawberry farms. So this has been produced by Dogtooth Technologies, and it's a strawberry harvesting robot that works with tabletop growing systems in both glasshouses and polytunnels that are widely used around the world. And these little robots are capable of autonomous navigation, so they can go up and down the crop rows. They can then use their eyes, or well, their cameras, to locate and pick ripe fruits. And what they even have is onboard quality control capabilities. So they're able to grade the berries that they pick. They place them directly into the punnets according to supermarket criteria. So if they're picking for one supermarket that needs a really high quality crop, it can pick a certain fruit, whereas a different supermarket with a lower requirement, it could then place it in a different punnet. So what they do is they use this patented vision technology to crop walk, quote unquote, crop walk. And they can also count the berries at each stage of maturity, so they can provide insight to the grower into the condition of the crop, but also provide yield forecasting as well. So when harvesting, it uses its cameras to image every berry and determine if it's ripe to pick. So they don't just pick them. And you can kind of see what it would look like in the top right hand of the image in the top right hand corner there, where it's looking at all the different parts of the plant and it's deciding which ones look like what it should look like. And like I say, it can also then measure and weigh the fruit. It can determine its diameter and then distribute the berries into the punnets. And also what it'll do is it'll reject any defective berries as well. So it'll just pick them out and get rid of them. So I think the reason why I brought this to our attention is because we have a huge problem in Scotland with seasonal workers and not being able to harvest all of the fruit that we have. Whereas these robots here, they can harvest around 200 kilos a day, which is a huge amount. They can work at night, they can work over multiple shifts, they in theory will not unionize, which I guess maybe they will eventually, I don't know, because they are robots, they'll probably take over. But they have a job to do and they know what they need to do. So I think, you know, it's kind of an exciting technology. And I think the fact that it's a UK technology that is applicable to Scotland, I think is kind of why I wanted to highlight it. But the insights that it can provide to the grower, I think, is really exciting as well. So finally, and just something totally different, I focused so far on technology for traditional crops, but the way we produce protein is changing too. And earlier it was mentioned about deforestation for cattle. So looking at protein and alternative sources is really needs to come to the fore, I think, because as you know, traditional livestock farming has a huge environmental impact. And so the demand for sustainable protein is growing. It's a really prime area of research at the moment. Plant-based mycoprotein alternatives, they are becoming mainstream. I'm sure we've probably all been, we've all had one, some sort of plant-based alternative at some point. And I think the good thing is that they offer lower environmental impact compared to meat, while maintaining similar taste and texture. Although I would say, I'm not sure my husband would agree, because he does like his steak. But focusing specifically on mycoproteins. So these are made from fermented fungi. And they do have a meat-like texture, as a lot of mushrooms do. And benefits include lower carbon footprint compared to animal agriculture. They require minimal land and water, and also claim to have beneficial health benefits as well. So just a couple of alternatives, and I promise I'm almost finished. So corn, we probably have all heard of corn. It's readily available in the supermarkets. They are the world's leading producer of mycoprotein, and it's used in a variety of meat substances. They use a very specific fungi called Fusarium venenatum. Testing my Latin here. And what they do is they grow them in these fermentation tanks. So if you think about the comparison between how much it would produce versus looking at beef, it says to have a carbon footprint of about 40% lower than beef, and about 40 times lower than beef, and 6 times lower than chicken. And a water footprint of 30 times lower than beef and 6 times lower than chicken. So they're stats from the corn website, so not from research that I've done other than that. But I can believe it. I can believe it. Whereas what's interesting about, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Enifer, so they've produced this registered mycoprotein called Pellico. This is kind of interesting. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Latin of this one, but they use a different fungal strain. And it is versatile, it's flavorless. And what's interesting is that it's used in not just human food, but also fish food, pet food. It could be used for cattle as well. So when you think about the majority of feed that is now given to cattle comes from soy, it's said that this is it produces about 70% less greenhouse gases than soy protein. So I think it offers a kind of an interesting alternative to look at for cattle feed when comparing to soy for livestock food. Okay, so I've said all these wonderful things, and I think it's, it's really exciting. It is a really exciting time in production horticulture and in the world of agriculture 4.0. But there are some challenges that we do still need to overcome. So for some of these systems, there is a high initial cost. Depends on how high tech it is, but we have to admit that there is a high cost. The controlled environment farming can be energy intensive as well. So we do need to consider the need for energy sourcing. Where does it come from? Can we look at sustainable sources of energy like solar or wind? I think for the UK, we have a lot of wind energy, so we could probably use it a little bit better and apply it to food production as well. Consumer acceptance is an interesting one. A lot of my students, I use the radical term of a plant factory, and they really don't like it because they think it's just this completely unnatural thing and we shouldn't be talking about it until they then see the benefits of it. But consumer acceptance, I think, is certainly one of them, that if people knew kind of where their food come from, would that impact them? But I think if they actually knew the alternative, they would probably be quite accepting. And also, I think scaling up, this is a big hurdle. We do see, I mentioned InFarm, I think it was earlier, the German company. So the one that was producing the vending machines for supermarkets. So they have very recently gone almost bankrupt, but they are now coming back. And it was because of the scalability. So everybody wanted their product, everybody wanted it. It went into all major European supermarkets. And then they couldn't, for some reason, there was a hurdle that they couldn't overcome. And it was to do with, I think, the rapid upscaling. So there are challenges. However, I would say with that said, we've seen, as I've covered and as we've seen, the future of food production is being shaped by innovative, resource efficient and sustainable techniques. Soilless farming methods like hydroponics and aeroponics, aquaponics are making agriculture more space and water efficient. We have mycoprotein alternatives. These are transforming the protein industry with sustainable and scalable solutions. And some might even say that insect proteins will become much more popular as time goes on. I know that entomophagy is widely accepted around the world, so maybe it will come to Europe eventually. And then finally, smart farming and, the technologies such as AI and vertical farms, this autonomous robots, these are redefining how we grow food in urban and rural settings. But I think, as I've said, the challenge is scaling these innovations whilst addressing costs and energy demands and consumer acceptance. But as the technology advances and investment grows, I think the solutions will play a crucial role in feeding a growing global population sustainably, hopefully. So it is changing rapidly. The future of food is changing. And I think we all have a role to play in supporting these innovations. So thank you for listening. I've probably gone way over time, but hopefully that was interesting. And I'm happy to take any questions when the time comes. Thank you.